First, I just want to be overjoyed to have my children, my family, my friends here, to see some of this great work that we've been doing here at the ACLU of Rhode Island. John, I'm just honored and privileged to be a part of an amazing organization doing such critical work, fighting for all Rhode Island civil liberties. I know for myself, I've learned so much being a part of the ACLU of Rhode Island. As a volunteer, I gained more than any formal education or paid position could ever last, and lasting friendships with individuals who share the same passion and unwavering dedication. And I just hope that if you haven't already volunteered, please volunteer. And if you have, thank you, and keep up the great work. Thank you.
Well, I promised Steve that it wouldn't be a situation where I was Faye and he was Warren, but I just want to take this one little point to say a story. When I started working at the ACLU, I had a baby. And when I was working at the ACLU, I had another baby. In fact, I missed the Dukakis evening because I was giving birth. That daughter turned 21 on the day of the election of Donald J. Trump. And she called me crying. But when she was young, she used to say, "My mom works for the ACLU." And now she says, "My mom works for the ACLU." So I'm really excited about the young people and how they've gotten involved in rights, and it took me about 40 years, but I finally got cool.
Carolyn's always been cool. So let's give all the recipients and all the affiliates, former and current board members, one more round of applause.
At the Florence Immigrant and Refugee Rights Project in Arizona and the Bronx Defenders in New York City. He was a clinical teaching fellow at the Catherine Greenberg Immigration Justice Clinic at the Benjamin N. Cardozo School of Law. More recently, he was a refugee status determination and resettlement expert for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees in El Salvador, the Dominican Republic, Trinidad, Tobago, Curacao, and Washington, D.C. His writing has appeared in The Guardian, The Huffington Post, Public Radio International, Vox, Out Magazine, and the Providence Journal. His story has been featured in the New York Times and on NBC News, and he is a frequent commentator on CBS News. In 2017, NBC News named Luis one of the 30 LGBTQ change makers in the country. That same year, the City of New York selected him as the LGBTQ Activist of the Year. Please welcome back to Rhode Island, Luis MANCHENO.
What an introduction. I hope that I lived to the expectation, really. Good evening, everybody. First of all, I have to say thank you to every single person who has organized this wonderful evening. I also thank all of the people who work every day and volunteer for the ACLU of Rhode Island. And of course, I thank all of you for being here tonight and being here supporting the amazing work that this organization does. I think that it's important, given that it is the 60th year anniversary of the ACLU of Rhode Island, for me to talk a little bit about my own story. I feel like my own story in many ways encompasses many of the reasons why this organization exists. I am 32 years old. I was born in Quito, Ecuador. For people who are not familiar with Quito, Quito is a city in the middle of the South American Andes. I was raised in a family that was very loving. I do not have any complaints really about my parents when I was growing up. I always had food on the table. I always had access to good education. And I'll tell you, I even got to go to Disney World twice. So you can imagine for a child, especially for a child living in Ecuador, it's a very special and privileged life that I had when I was a child. At the same time, my family was incredibly conservative. Very, very evangelical, a very unique feature actually for a family in Ecuador. Very proud of the fact that, you know, we had been raised evangelical. I went to church every Sunday. I went to Bible study every Friday. I did youth group on Wednesdays. And in general, everything in my life had to do with church. Just to give you an idea, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but you know the Harry Potter books, right? Well, I was not allowed to read them because, I know, right? What a shame. Because my family believed that there was witchcraft in it. Don't tell my family, but there is witchcraft in the Harry Potter books. Also, don't tell my family, but I read them all. You know, reading the Harry Potter books for me was very special, I think, because the character of Harry Potter is this character of somebody who is different. Somebody who is different and who felt that he was not born in the right place and he was not understood by the people around him and sort of like always wished that he belonged somewhere else. And I think that in many ways, that was my childhood. I always felt that I was different. I always felt that I was not like the rest of the boys my age. I didn't like sports that much. According to my dad, I played with Barbies a little too much. And so I always felt that I just didn't fit. I just didn't fit in what my parents wanted me to be and in general what society expected me to be. If you haven't figured it out yet, I am a gay man. And realizing that at 14, you can imagine, especially coming from such a conservative family, how that played in my head. Part of me believe, and it's sort of like the belief that many LGBTQ people feel, which is that it's going to be something that is temporary, right? I'm going to live it through, and eventually it's going to go away. Inside, I also thought, if it doesn't go away, I'll keep it a secret forever. You know, it will live with me, and I will never talk about it. Well, unfortunately, the secret came out. And at 18 years old, my parents found out that I'm gay. I'll tell you that, of course, my parents didn't take it the right way. I remember my father coming into the bedroom and saying to me, why did you do this to us? Why did you do this to yourself? He then proceeded to hit me, punch me, to the point that he left me on the floor bleeding. My mother came in and sort of did the same. And there I was bleeding alone, wanting to end my life, and wondering, why is it that God made me that way? You know, I felt so guilty, especially with my parents, that I decided that under their pressure that I was going to go to conversion therapy. So I went to see a doctor that sort of treated me and cured me. And eventually, I remember that he told my parents, Luis is cured. I would like to see his face right now. Cure I am, right? Life continued in Ecuador, and to be honest, continued in the only way that I can explain it is by sheer human resilience. I continued to live and to fight with my parents, and some time passed. At 21 years old, actually, I ended up going to a gay bar for the first time. I had a friend visiting, a friend that I had a crush on, and we went to the gay bar together. At the bar, my goal that night was that I wanted to make out with my friend. He's this very handsome man, so I wanted to make out with him. However, my goal was shared by many of the attendees at the bar as well. Suddenly, I see myself in the corner, and my friend Camilo, that's his name, was surrounded by all of these beautiful men, and there I was sitting by the bar alone. As I am sitting, I see on the other side of the bar that there's this guy looking at me. He's this very handsome guy, and he starts walking towards me, and he introduces himself. He says hi. I say hi. I'm still a little bit surprised, honestly, because I'm like, this really beautiful man is talking to me right now. What did I do, right? And eventually he offers me a drink. I said, sure, let's have a drink. I took that drink, and it's the last thing I remember. I woke up behind the steering wheel of my car. There was blood all over my face. My car had crashed. I couldn't move my legs. I suddenly realized that my friend is in the back of the car. I start yelling his name, and I say, Camilo, Camilo, and Camilo is not answering. I am desperate, and I put my finger on his nose to make sure that he's breathing, and he is breathing. The next thing I do, I started crying because I had no idea what was happening. Eventually, I'm able to push the door, get out of the car, crawl on the side of the road, and I sit there and I look at what happened. I realized that the people or the person who I still don't know who attacked me had left my car running on top of a hill and have left it running all the way down the hill towards a cliff. The reason why I'm talking to all of you today is because there was a light post that my car crashed against. If it wouldn't be for that light post, I wouldn't be talking to you today. I cannot explain, and it is still hard for me to explain what it means to be almost murdered. It's this mix of anxiety and terror and true fear of not knowing what's coming next, and also knowing that your life is so short and fast and it can end at any minute. I see on the side of the car that the word maricón was written on it. Maricón means faggot in Spanish. And I realized then that somebody tried to kill me for being gay. You know what the first thing that I thought was? My parents were right. That's what I thought. I thought they were all along right. The fact that being gay was only going to bring bad things, and including death to my life. And the first thing I did was not call the police, was not call my parents. The first thing that I wanted to do was to erase the words from my car. Because even in the most desperate time in my life, all I wanted to do was to erase the word gay from my life. I wet my sweater on a puddle that I found nearby, and I literally erased the word gay as I prayed to God to change me. couple of days later, I went to the police, and the police refused to do anything, arguing that they didn't have jurisdiction over the bar where this happened. They laughed at me, and my relationship with my parents was in such a bad place that I decided not to tell them. I was a good student, though. I think that part of being LGBT sometimes is that we tend to overcompensate. And I was a very good student, and I was able to access this scholarship. I wanted to get out of Ecuador as soon as possible, and there was this scholarship that was being offered at my college to go to do an exchange student program in Oregon. I had no idea where Oregon was. I think that there are many people, even in this room, who still do not know where Oregon is. But I said, Oregon, far enough, I'm in. On July 31st of 2008, I arrived in this country. I've told this story many times before, and I always say that I brought $200 in my pocket. Well, that's a lie. I brought $203 in my pocket. I eventually settled in Oregon, and through real luck, I was able to find out about asylum. One of my good friends was volunteer at an asylum clinic in Oregon, and she taught me about asylum and eventually allowed me to learn that there was such a thing as being protected from being persecuted in your home country. I applied for asylum on December of 2008. If you would ask me, and I do a training for asylum officers today, and they always ask me, we want to know how we did with you. We want to know how was the asylum office interview. It was one of the worst experiences of my life. So I'm glad that I'm doing the training for them now. But it was such a bad experience that after having it, I said, I'm just not going to get asylum. I lost all hope, and all I was waiting for is to be placed in deportation proceedings and be deported to the country that I fear my life was going to be taken away. On the morning of August 24, 2009, I woke up to go to work. I got ready, walked to the mailbox, and there was a letter there, an envelope from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. I opened the letter, and the letter said that I was granted asylum in the United States. You know, for the first time, it was such a powerful feeling. A feeling so powerful that for the first time in my life, I was able to feel stability. I was able to feel that I finally could do what I wanted to do with my life. The grant of asylum was such a big spark in my life that I decided to become no other than an immigration lawyer. And I'll tell you that, you know, when I share my story, one of the reasons why I share it is because my story is no different than the hundreds of thousands of stories of people out there right now, in fact, who are seeking asylum, who are seeking refugee status, who are being murdered for being LGBT, and who see this country as their only hope. In fact, I share my story because my story is no different than the story of the man that the ACLU of Rhode Island this September helped preventing from being deported to a country where he would be tortured. You know, my husband is here. Your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life. And I would say that my wedding day was one of the happiest days of my life. And I'll tell you that the happiest day of my life, no doubt, was July 10 of 2016. That day in a courthouse in Brooklyn, I was sworn as a U.S. citizen. As I was being sworn in with about 200 to 300 people in the courthouse, there was this magistrate judge who was giving us a message that she wanted all of us to know. And she said the following: I want all of you to know that you are as much as a U.S. citizen as anybody else who was born in this country. You know what? I hold that promise to my heart every day. The promise, really, that I am equal under the law. And the promise that this is my country. And I talk about equality under the law because so many of the fights that this organization has had to do specifically with that. In fact, just like last year and this year, the ACLU of Rhode Island has been fighting to get information on all of the violations that the Providence School District has made on the federal regulations regarding access to education that people whose English as a second language have in the schools in Providence. The word that this organization that is so, as somebody mentioned before, can sometimes feel so local, but the impact that these decisions have throughout the country and throughout the people who live in this country that we love so much is incredibly huge. It is thanks to the work that attorneys and volunteers and staffers and the support that each one of you is doing tonight and has done in the past and will continue to do, that people like me are able to be standing here and being able to, one, speak English, two, have had access to education in English and become a lawyer. That right there is the real American dream. The American dream that would have not been possible but for the amazing work, the social justice warriors of people like the ones working at the ACLU of Rhode Island. So today, and it's interesting that I mentioned this, because today I almost was not able to be here because I happened to be litigating a case in the Second Circuit. And a case in the Second Circuit of an LGBT man who was persecuted for, because of his sexual orientation and was wrongfully removed a couple of weeks ago to Guatemala. As I was litigating this case this morning, I was thinking sort of like the full circle that my life has taken. And I thought how that related to the promise that this country has for every one of the people who call it ours. I think that the promise that this country has is the same promise that the ACLU is hoping to fight for every single day as this organization moves. I actually think that this country is better, and I'm sure that this country is better because of the work that this organization does. So today, I thank every single one of you for whatever big or small contribution you have made to this organization, because thanks to that is that people like me will be coming next year and next year and next year, and we'll be giving you the good news and the good fortunes that your contributions and your work has brought to the lives of many, not only in the U.S., but worldwide. So thank you.
Thank you, Luis, for that inspiring story and for recognizing the significance of this wonderful organization. That concludes our program. And the panels, I never remember to mention these panels. Do enjoy them if you haven't already. They were designed by Brian Jones Designs, and they depict the milestone cases and events of the ACLU for the last 60 years. And then there's this